The scream that echoed through the corporate headquarters of Frost Industries wasn't from pain or fear, it was pure, unbridled rage. Victoria Frost stood over a trembling assistant, shards of a coffee mug scattered across the pristine marble floor. "I said no sugar." Her voice cut through the air like the winter winds that had given her company its name. In the doorway, a maintenance worker quickly averted his eyes, clutching his toolbox tighter. Everyone knew, you don't look the Ice Queen in the eyes unless spoken to. If you're watching this story unfold, hit that like button now, because what happens next changed everything in ways nobody saw coming. The maintenance worker was Jake Sullivan, a man who kept his head down for good reason. Not because he feared Victoria Frost like everyone else, but because he had more important things to worry about, like making sure his 8-year-old daughter Emma had everything she needed despite the universe seeming determined to take it all away. Subscribe to see more stories that will warm your heart even in the coldest circumstances. Victoria Frost hadn't always been feared. Once, she'd been Victoria Hayes, brilliant, ambitious, and surprisingly kind. But 10 years of clawing her way to the top of a male-dominated industry had frozen something inside her. The business press called her the Ice Queen of Wall Street, a title she secretly despised but publicly embraced. Fear was efficient. Fear got results. And results were all that mattered when you were a woman who'd built a billion-dollar empire from nothing. Jake Sullivan had once been half of a perfect pair. A structural engineer with a promising career ahead of him, he'd had it all, the beautiful wife, the dream home in the suburbs, and then their miracle baby after years of trying. But cancer doesn't care about perfect lives. 3 years ago, Melissa had gone from diagnosis to gone in 6 brutal months, leaving Jake with a mountain of medical debt and a 5-year-old who still asked when mommy was coming home. The maintenance job at Frost Industries wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough to keep a roof over their heads and covered Emma's asthma medication. Jake had learned to be invisible in the corporate hallways, fixing what needed fixing without disturbing the important people. He'd heard the stories about Victoria Frost, how she'd fired an executive for crying at work after his divorce, how she'd crushed competing companies without remorse, how she wore exclusively white as if to emphasize the coldness she exuded. Victoria's morning had started badly and was getting worse. The Johnson deal was falling apart, her CFO had just announced his retirement, and her mother had called again, asking when she was going to settle down with a nice man. At 38, Victoria had long ago decided that nice was incompatible with her life goals. Men wanted her money or wanted to control her, often both. Relationships were inefficient. Love was a liability. When her assistant brought the wrong coffee for the 3rd time that week, something in Victoria snapped. The mug flew from her hand before she could stop herself, shattering against the wall. She didn't mean to scream, didn't mean to make the young woman cry. But weakness was contagious, and Victoria couldn't afford to show any. "Clean this up," she ordered, her voice returning to its usual controlled chill. "And send in the next appointment." Jake had been fixing a faulty thermostat in the conference room next to Victoria's office when he heard the commotion. He shouldn't have looked, shouldn't have paused in the doorway, but something about the assistant's quiet sobs as she knelt to pick up ceramic shards struck a chord. He remembered Emma's tears when she'd accidentally broken a photo frame containing one of the few pictures they had of Melissa. "Let me help with that," he said quietly, setting down his toolbox and kneeling beside the assistant. "You might cut yourself." Victoria looked up from her computer, irritated by the interruption. "Who are you?" Jake didn't flinch under her icy stare. "Maintenance. Just helping clean up so no one gets hurt. I don't pay maintenance to babysit my staff. Sarah is perfectly capable of cleaning up her own mess." Jake met Victoria's eyes then, something few dared to do. "Actually, ma'am, with all due respect, it looks like it was your mess." The office went deadly silent. Sarah froze, eyes wide with horror. Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch, the equivalent of a gasp from anyone else. "What's your name?" Victoria asked, her voice dangerously soft. Jake Sullivan. Well, Mr. Sullivan, I suggest you focus on maintaining the building and leave personnel matters to me. Unless you're eager to join the unemployment statistics. Jake should have apologized. Should have backed away. But something about this woman's coldness towards someone clearly already having a bad day reminded him too much of the doctors who delivered Melissa's prognosis without an ounce of compassion. I'll finish helping Sarah, and then I'll get back to the thermostat in your conference room. Which, by the way, is running 5 degrees too cold. Maybe that's why everyone around here seems so frosty. He said it quietly, without malice, but the words hung in the air between them. Victoria's face remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, or a grudging respect for his audacity. 5 minutes, she said finally. Then I want both of you out of my sight. Jake helped Sarah clean up the mess, whispering reassurances that Victoria would forget about this by tomorrow. But Victoria Frost didn't forget anything. As she watched the maintenance man, this Jake Sullivan, gently helping her assistant, she made a mental note to have HR pull his file. Not to fire him, though that would have been the expected move. No, Victoria was curious. Curiosity was a luxury she rarely indulged anymore. That evening, Victoria sat in her penthouse overlooking the city, a glass of untouched wine beside her as she scrolled through Jake Sullivan's employee file. Widower. Single father. Former structural engineer who'd taken a significant pay cut after his wife's death. Exemplary work record. No complaints. No accolades either, just steady, reliable work. Victoria closed the file, unsettled by her own interest. She had no reason to care about this man's story. Tomorrow, she would forget about him and focus on salvaging the Johnson deal. That was what mattered. But the next morning, as Victoria strode through the lobby toward the executive elevator, she spotted Jake Sullivan kneeling beside a small girl with auburn braids, adjusting her backpack straps. The child was wearing a medical mask, and even from a distance, Victoria could see she was pale. "You sure you're okay for school today, Em?" Jake was asking, his voice gentle but worried. "I'm fine, Daddy," the girl insisted, though her voice sounded weak even to Victoria's untrained ear. "Ms. Peterson is reading Charlotte's Web today. I can't miss it." "Okay, but if you start feeling bad, you call me right away. I can be at your school in 15 minutes. Promise." The girl held up her pinky, and Jake linked his with hers solemnly. Victoria found herself frozen in place, watching this tender exchange. Something about the girl's brave face and the father's obvious concern pierced through layers of protection Victoria had built around herself. She remembered her own father, gone 20 years now, and how he'd check her forehead for fever with the back of his hand, his touch always so gentle. Jake looked up then and saw Victoria watching them. His expression shifted, becoming guarded. He whispered something to his daughter, who turned to look at Victoria with curious eyes. Victoria should have continued to the elevator. Should have pretended not to see them. Instead, she found herself walking toward the pair. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Is everything all right?" Jake stood, positioning himself slightly in front of his daughter. "Yes, Miss Frost. Just a small childcare hiccup this morning. My daughter's after-school program was cancelled last minute. She'll be in the break room for an hour after school until my shift ends. I've already cleared it with HR." Victoria looked at the little girl, who was studying her with none of the fear adults showed around Victoria. "What's your name?" she asked, softening her voice without even realizing she was doing it. "Emma Sullivan," the child answered, offering a small hand as if they were business associates. "It's nice to meet you, ma'am." Victoria found herself shaking the tiny hand, noting how warm it felt. Too warm. "Are you feeling well, Emma?" "I'm okay," Emma said, but a small cough belied her words. "Daddy says I just need to use my inhaler more when the weather changes." Jake placed a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. "We should let Ms. Frost get to her meetings, Em." Victoria surprised herself by saying, "Actually, I have a better idea. Emma, would you like to see where your father works? I could give you a tour of the building." Jake's expression was a mixture of suspicion and confusion. "That's very kind, but I'm sure you're busy." "I insist," Victoria said, the words coming out more like her usual commanding tone than she intended. She softened and added, "Unless you'd rather not, of course." Emma looked up at her father with pleading eyes. "Can I, Daddy? Please?" Jake hesitated, clearly torn between not wanting to disappoint his daughter and not trusting Victoria's sudden interest. "I suppose, if it's really no trouble." "None at all," Victoria said, and was surprised to find she meant it. The tour was brief but comprehensive. Victoria showed Emma the maintenance department where her father worked, the cafeteria, where she instructed the chef to prepare a special hot chocolate for their young guest, and finally, her own executive suite. Throughout, Emma asked intelligent questions that made Victoria smile despite herself. The child had a quick mind and a gentle heart, a combination Victoria had once possessed herself, before the world had taught her that one usually came at the expense of the other. As they returned to the lobby, Emma's school bus pulling up outside, Victoria found herself reluctant to end their time together. "Perhaps you could visit again sometime," she said, the words surprising her as much as they clearly surprised Jake. Emma beamed. "I'd like that. Your building is amazing. Daddy says you built your whole company yourself. That's really cool." Victoria felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest at the child's admiration. "Thank you, Emma. That means a lot." After Emma had boarded her bus, waving enthusiastically through the window, Jake turned to Victoria with a puzzled expression. "Why did you do that?" Victoria considered deflecting, giving some corporate answer about employee morale or community relations. Instead, she found herself saying, "I'm not entirely sure. She reminds me of someone, I think." "Who?" Victoria met his eyes, startled by the directness of his question. No one asked her personal questions anymore. "Myself, perhaps. A long time ago." She straightened her shoulders, uncomfortable with her own vulnerability. "Your daughter should be in school today, Mr. Sullivan. She's clearly unwell." Jake's expression hardened. "I'm well aware of my daughter's health needs, Ms. Frost. Emma's immune system is compromised from her treatments. A common cold can put her in the hospital. But she also needs normalcy and education. It's a balance I navigate every day." "Treatments?" Victoria asked before she could stop herself. Jake hesitated, then sighed. "Emma has the same type of leukemia that took her mother. She's in remission now, but..." He trailed off, the unspoken fear hanging between them. Victoria felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. This man, whom she'd nearly fired yesterday for a moment of impertinence, was carrying a burden she couldn't begin to imagine. And he carried it with dignity, without complaint, showing up each day to fix things others broke. "I'm sorry," she said, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. When was the last time she'd apologized to anyone? "I shouldn't have presumed to know what's best for your daughter." Jake studied her face, as if searching for the catch. Finding none, he nodded. "Thank you for the tour. Emma won't stop talking about it for weeks." "She's welcome anytime," Victoria said, and was surprised to realize she meant it. As Jake walked away, Victoria remained rooted to the spot, a strange feeling unfurling in her chest. It took her a moment to identify it as shame for who she'd become, for the fear she instilled, for the coffee mug thrown in anger. When had she become someone her younger self would have despised? The Johnson deal fell through that afternoon. 10 years ago, Victoria would have raged, would have demanded heads roll. Instead, she found herself thinking of Emma's brave face and Jake's quiet dignity. Some things, she realized, were more important than business victories. That night, Victoria did something she hadn't done in years. She called her mother. The conversation was awkward at first, years of distance creating a chasm between them. But when Victoria mentioned meeting a remarkable child that day, her mother's voice softened. "You always had a way with children," her mother said. "Remember how you used to read to the neighbor kids? They adored you." Victoria did remember. She remembered a lot of things she'd forced herself to forget in her climb to the top. The call ended with a tentative plan for dinner the following weekend, another step Victoria hadn't taken in years. The next morning, Victoria arrived at the office earlier than usual. She stopped by the maintenance department, ignoring the startled looks from the staff, and left a small package on Jake's workbench with a note. Then she went to her office and did something else unprecedented. She apologized to Sarah for her behavior the previous day. When Jake arrived at work, he found the package waiting. Inside was a state-of-the-art air purifier, small enough to fit in Emma's backpack, with a note, "For Emma. It might help with the school air quality. No strings attached. VF." Jake stared at the device, torn between pride and gratitude. The air purifier was exactly what Emma's doctor had recommended, but at several $100s, it had been out of reach. How had Victoria known? He hadn't mentioned it during their conversation. The answer came later that day when Victoria's assistant called him to the executive floor. Expecting to be reprimanded for accepting the gift, Jake was surprised when Sarah ushered him directly into Victoria's office. Victoria was standing by the window, looking out at the city. She turned when he entered, her expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "Mr. Sullivan. Thank you for coming." "Ms. Frost," Jake acknowledged, the air purifier box in his hands. "I came to return this. It's incredibly generous, but I can't accept such an expensive gift." Victoria's face fell slightly before she composed herself. "May I ask why not?" "Because I don't know what it means," Jake said honestly. "In my experience, people don't give gifts like this without expecting something in return." Victoria flinched as if he'd struck her. "I suppose I deserve that perception." She gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. I'd like to explain." Reluctantly, Jake sat, placing the box on her desk between them. "After we spoke yesterday, I did some research on childhood leukemia," Victoria said, her voice carefully controlled. One article mentioned air quality as a significant concern for children in remission. The purifier was recommended by several medical sites. She paused. "There are no strings attached, Mr. Sullivan. Consider it an apology for my behavior and a thank you for reminding me of something important I'd forgotten." "What's that?" Jake asked, genuinely curious. Victoria met his eyes. "That strength doesn't have to mean coldness. That fear isn't the only way to command respect." She looked away. "Your daughter reminded me of who I used to be, before I convinced myself I had to become this, to succeed." The vulnerability in her voice was so unexpected that Jake found himself at a loss for words. This wasn't the ice queen of Wall Street sitting before him, this was simply a woman who had lost her way. "Emma has that effect on people," he said finally. "She sees the good in everyone. Even when they can't see it themselves." Victoria smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "She's extraordinary. You've done an amazing job raising her, especially under such difficult circumstances." "I take it day by day," Jake admitted. "Some days are harder than others." "The air purifier is yours, no strings attached," Victoria reiterated. "But I do have a proposition for you, if you're willing to hear it." Jake tensed, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Your employee file says you were a structural engineer before taking this position," Victoria continued. "With an impressive resume. We have an opening in our development department for someone with exactly your qualifications. The salary is substantially better than your current position, and the hours are more flexible. Jake stared at her, stunned. Why would you do that for me? I'm not doing it for you, Victoria said, her business acumen reasserting itself. I'm doing it for Frost Industries. We need good people, and you're overqualified for maintenance work. It's a waste of resources. Jake wasn't fooled by her corporate explanation, but he appreciated the attempt to preserve his dignity. Still, he hesitated. The maintenance position works with my schedule. Emma needs consistency right now. The development position includes remote work options and flexible hours, Victoria countered. You'd report directly to me, which means